doctors thought it was just a simple abdominal tumor, until further tests revealed something unimaginable. How could a child be battling such a deadly growth? The truth will shock you. Stay with us for this heartbreaking yet astonishing story. And don't forget to tell us where you're listening from. The car swerved hazardously down busy streets, tires shrieking in protest as Stark struggled with the wheel. Keisha twisted in the back seat, her tortured cries torn from the air. Premature contractions racked her body with unnaturally intense force. Some primitive instinct informed her that something was horribly wrong. Every cell in her body cried out that they were fighting against time itself. They rushed in a state of panic to the emergency room, and Stark, out of breath and shaking, tried to explain Keisha's state in broken gasps. His wife, pale and sweating excessively now, could only utter agonized whimpers between contractions of pain. It took the hospital personnel mere seconds to evaluate the emergency, her own blood pressure skyrocketing and the unborn's delicate vital signs in urgent need of attention. They prepared themselves for an emergency cesarean with rushed thoroughness, the air thick with tension and the metallic scent of antiseptic. Dr. Holland washed his hands with deliberate intensity, the antiseptic foam bubbling down the drain like the mess in his head. Resident Sam next to him grumbled an oath as she put on gloves. "This is not a routine C-section," Holland growled, his voice husky. "That liver scan was a war zone." Dr. Holland's pen lingered above Keisha's chart before slashing down 3 damning words: fetal hepatic teratoma. The neonatal team stared at each other. The wall clock ticked more loudly with each ticking second. "Stay with us, Keisha," the anesthesiologist whispered as the spinal block became effective. Her fingers clawed at the sheets, her eyes untamed with a mother's ancient terror. Monitors wailed their discordant symphony, blood pressure crashing, fetal heart rate faltering. Then a thin, reedy wail cut through the antiseptic air of the OR. Not the lusty cry they'd wanted, but alive. Keisha's head jerked up, IV tubes stretching tight. "My baby!" Her voice broke as nurses closed in around the resuscitation table, blocking her view. The last thing Keisha registered was the crash cart rattling toward her before the world dissolved into ink. Somewhere beyond the void, someone shouted, "She's coding!" But the words meant nothing as the darkness swallowed her whole. Stark was horror-stricken as his wife's body went limp, her arms and legs inert on the sterile bed linens. A primitive wail was ripped from his throat, raw, anguished, as he cried out for help, his thoughts racing toward the unbearable. She was dead. The surgical team that ringed him worked with frantic haste, suturing the incision closed as red seeped beneath her, a grisly counterpoint to the dazzling white linens. Amidst the commotion, the medical team operated in flawless synchrony, physicians shouting commands, nurses giving quick transfusions, all struggling to drag her back from the edge. Stark's vision blurred, the world melting into a sickening blur of panic and fluorescent lighting. Then, a strong hand clamped onto his shoulder. "See your daughter," a nurse prompted, taking him to the warming bassinet. And there she stood. His breath hitched. Swaddled in gauzy linen, her miniature form glowed with the fragile vitality of new life. Skin flushed rose gold, chest rising in tiny, determined bursts. She was perfect, a miracle incarnate, so improbably whole amidst the wreckage of the moment. Stark's knees nearly buckled under the weight of it, this fierce, dazzling love that eclipsed even his terror. For a lovely, horrible instant, Stark was lost in his daughter's face. The flawless curve of her cheek, the way her small fingers instinctively clutched at air. Then a loud beep from the monitors brought him back to the present. His gut plummeted when he realized the crash team was struggling over Keisha, the defibrillator paddles causing her body to convulse wildly. Tears blurred his vision as he pressed his lips to his daughter's forehead and began praying in broken whispers. "Please, God, don't take her from us. Not now. Not like this." It felt cruel beyond words. Just months ago, he'd come home to find Keisha dancing around their kitchen, waving the positive test like a victory flag. They'd been so full of hope, so ready for this new chapter. This wasn't how their story was supposed to go. Then, a murmur from the nurses, a weak but steady beep from the heart monitor. Stark held his breath as Keisha's eyelids fluttered open. The relief that washed over him was so powerful his legs nearly gave out. Against all odds, she was coming back to him. "Bring her to me. Now." Stark's voice cracked as he begged the nurses. Every second felt stolen, precious and fragile. Keisha's eyes, still glazed with exhaustion, lit up when they placed their daughter in her arms. She traced the baby's face with trembling fingers, drinking in every detail like she might forget. 8 months of carrying this miracle, and here she was, alive, against all odds. Then they took the baby away again. The words, routine tests, did nothing to ease the vice around Stark's chest. Premature, underdeveloped, something wrong. Keisha's monitor shrieked in protest as her blood pressure skyrocketed, and then merciful drugs dragged her under before she could hear the worst. Alone in the fluorescent hell of the waiting room, Stark paced like a caged animal. They'd benched him, told him to sit and wait while his daughter fought for her life down some sterile hallway. His fists clenched uselessly at his sides. He should be doing something, bargaining, screaming, anything. But the hospital had reduced him to a name on a clipboard. When Keisha surfaced hours later, groggy and disoriented, her first slurred word was, "Baby?" Stark swallowed the lump in his throat and told her what little he knew, which was nothing. Nothing concrete, nothing comforting, just the unbearable weight of not knowing and the shared, unspoken terror in their clasped hands. The moment the doctor stepped inside, Stark and Keisha were on their feet, eyes wild, hands shaking. They didn't just want answers, they needed them, like air, like a lifeline. But the doctor's face, God, his face, told them everything before he even spoke. That slow exhale, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of bad news. Then the words came, sharp and cold as a scalpel. Something's wrong. Their baby wouldn't eat. Her tiny belly swelled taut and hard, like a balloon ready to burst. "We need to keep searching," the doctor said, but Stark heard the unspoken terror beneath his calm tone. "Before it's too late." Keisha's knees buckled. A raw sound tore from her throat, the kind of cry that comes from somewhere deeper than pain. Because this wasn't just fear. It was the unraveling of a future. The crib they'd assembled, the tiny socks folded in drawers, the name they'd whispered to each other at night. All of it slipping through their fingers. Then, suddenly, Keisha gasped. "The tumor," she choked out. Her fingers dug into Stark's arm as she dragged the memory forward. The scan, the shadow on the liver, the radiologist's tight-lipped concern. She spilled it all in a frantic rush, as if the words themselves could stitch their daughter back together. For the first time, the doctor's expression shifted. Not hope, not quite, but something close to recognition. "I'll check," he said. And just like that, he was gone, leaving them suspended in the silence. Stark followed the medical team like a shadow, his hands trembling as they wheeled his daughter away. When they lifted her tiny hospital gown, his breath caught. There it was. A bizarre lump under her paper-thin skin, something that had no business being inside his perfect little girl. The doctor's gloves probed the area with clinical precision, but Stark saw the way their eyebrows twitched, that tiny flicker of uncertainty. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, his voice breaking. His mind raced to the worst possible conclusion. Cancer. The word echoed in his skull like a death knell. It wasn't fair. Keisha had been a damn saint during her pregnancy, choking down vitamins even when they made her nauseous, swapping her morning coffee for disgusting herbal tea, meticulously tracking every nutrient. She'd done everything right. Everything. And now their baby had this thing growing inside her. The doctors offered vague reassurances, but Stark wasn't stupid. He saw the way they avoided his eyes, how they murmured to each other in that coded medical language designed to keep parents in the dark. When they mentioned the scan, the risks, Stark's knees nearly gave out. All he could do was pray to a god he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. The medical team moved with urgent precision. Stark's throat tightened as he watched them insert the needle. His little girl was so small, so fragile. The screen flickered to life, revealing shadows and shapes that meant nothing to him, but everything to the doctors studying them intently. Then, without warning, the lead doctor froze. His face went pale. Without a word, he bolted from the room, leaving Stark's heart pounding. "What's happening?" Stark demanded, his voice cracking. The remaining staff exchanged uneasy glances but offered no answers. Each passing second stretched into eternity, his mind conjuring increasingly terrifying possibilities. Was it worse than cancer? Was his daughter dying right now while he stood helpless? When the doctors finally returned, their expressions sent a chill down Stark's spine. They looked shaken, almost disbelieving. "Mr. Holland," the lead doctor began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "What we're seeing, it's incredibly rare. In all my years." He trailed off, struggling to find words adequate for the impossible sight inside his daughter's tiny body. Stark's knees nearly gave way. His hands gripped the edge of the counter until his knuckles turned white. A fetus? Inside his newborn daughter? This wasn't possible. Things like this didn't happen in real life. He pinched his own arm hard, waiting to wake up from this nightmare. The doctor's words swirled around him like a bad radio signal. Vanishing twin. Fetus and fetus. 1 in a million occurrence. Each medical term hit him like a physical blow. His mind kept ripping on one unbearable image. His daughter had, in some impossible way, absorbed her own sibling. The pregnancy test they'd celebrated, the tiny socks they'd bought in pairs, the names they'd whispered in the dark. All of it took on a horrifying new meaning. Keisha would be destroyed. How could he even begin to explain this to her? Their perfect baby girl, their miracle, was carrying a terrible secret inside her tiny body. The truth settled over Stark like a suffocating weight. Twins. Keisha had carried 2 souls, not one, only for nature to twist their miracle into something disastrous. The image wouldn't leave him. One tiny life absorbing the other, a shadow sibling hidden beneath their daughter's ribs. It felt like a cruel joke, the kind of horror you'd scoff at in a medical drama. But the surgeons spoke with calm certainty. They could fix this. They would fix this. "Just save her," Stark choked out, his voice raw. That was all that mattered now. Keisha, still fragile from her own ordeal, didn't need the bizarre details. Not yet. She just needed to hold their living, breathing child at the end of this nightmare. The surgery was a blur of scrubs and sterile lights. Stark paced the waiting room, his mind conjuring every worst-case scenario, until finally, it's out. 2 inches of tissue. That's all it was. A mere fragment of what might have been a second child. The relief was crushing. But so was the grief. Somewhere between the hospital walls and the quiet hum of recovery, Stark allowed himself to mourn the twin they'd never know. Yet, when he finally held his daughter, her small chest rising and falling, her fingers curling around his, the sorrow blended with gratitude. She was here. She was whole. And though her story began with something unimaginable, it would not define her. Years later, doctors would call her case extraordinary. Were you surprised by the twist? How would you react in a similar situation? What do you think? Have you ever heard of fetus and fetus before? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more unbelievable stories.